You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today, broadcasting from Jerusalem here on a chilly January morning. It's a pleasure being with you. Yesterday, I had a very interesting experience. I've been covering the Knesset for 20 years, and I've never had the opportunity to set foot in the bottom floor of the Knesset Plenum where the members of Knesset actually sit. I've been hundreds and hundreds of times in the upper gallery where the press sits, and in the upper gallery where the public comes when they visit the Knesset. I've been a lot of places all over the building that nobody else has been in. Spent a lot of time there. The Knesset is very much a home to me. It's where my gym is, where the food used to be much better, and where I've had a lot of wonderful experiences that have made me what I am today, and I never forget what an honor and privilege it is to work in the Knesset. I remember my first experience there was visiting as an intern in the summer of '98, being taken around by Liat Collins, the veteran Knesset correspondent for the Jerusalem Post at the time, and I was given permission to enter the plenum, to sit in that journalist area up in the gallery, and because I climbed over a seat in order to get to Liat, they kicked me out. So my first day in the Knesset, I got kicked out. Now, yesterday, I kind of behaved in a way that should have gotten me kicked out, because this was a tour organized for about 25 reporters, and it was very formal. The Knesset speaker spoke to us. The Knesset secretary, Knesset speaker you all know is Yuli Edelstein. The Knesset secretary is a woman, you'll never hear that name again, and she was talking to us about procedural things with the Knesset. I'm thinking, A, we all know this, and B, we don't care to listen to you, and C, we're really only here to take pictures in the seats and walk around, and you're treating us like third graders. So I started to drift off. First I took a picture of myself in the first seat that was next to us, which happened to be the seat of Benny Begin, a very esteemed member of Knesset. And I sent this to my family, and I told them how special it was that I was getting to sit in Benny Begin's seat. But then we started being allowed to wander off more, and so I went up to this where the Knesset speaker sits, and the rostrum there where the people speaking in the Knesset actually speak from, had pictures taken over there, and then nobody was looking, so I went over to the Netanyahu seat, and I actually sat in Netanyahu's chair, and maybe we'll make this the picture that goes along with this particular show here on the Land of Israel.com. And so my friend Lahav took a picture of me sitting there, and then she said, like 5 minutes later, she said, I didn't push portrait. Maybe the picture would be better if I pushed portrait. And when I came back there, the guards were already telling people you're not allowed to sit there. So in the next picture I took was standing up near there, in which I made a better face. But it's not sitting in his seat. And so I'm saying this because after I posted these two pictures of me sitting in Netanyahu's seat, or almost sitting in Netanyahu's seat, I got people on social media saying, oh, this will be your seat one day, or you never know. And I'm thinking, I know. And the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is no. I don't want to be a politician. At some point, most people in their life want to be a politician for a short period of time. With most people, it's usually when they're really young. So when I was in second grade, I believe, I already knew all the names of all the presidents from Washington to Reagan and could recite them. And grown-ups were very impressed by this back then. And at that point, I believe I told people that I wanted to be the president of the United States. I got over it, ladies and gentlemen. I got over the desire to be in politics, and I got over the desire to live in America, coming to Israel every summer made me realize how wonderful it is to live here, having so much family here, having parents who are both raised here, who raised us with an awareness of the honor that we have of having a Jewish democratic state that we can be a part of and help with, be a part of history. I realized that's what was for me. And I realized that I liked writing about it, that I liked telling people around the world about what's happening behind the scenes here. And so I studied journalism at Northwestern, the best journalism school in the world, though with an administration that's made some poor decisions, opening a campus in Qatar, a state sponsor of terror, going to war against its Chabad house and making its rabbi persona non grata at the university level, not stopping the student government from passing a meaningless but very symbolic pro-BDS resolution. So I'm not very proud to be a Northwestern alum right now, but I am proud that I went to the top journalism school in the world. And that led to me meeting the publisher of the Jerusalem Post at an event called Do the Right Thing, WRITE, for young Jewish journalists at a General Assembly of the Jewish Federations of North America. That event is sponsored by the World Zionist Organization that I have to give credit to. That led to an internship in the summer of '98, and that led to the job that I've had since the fall of 1999. And so I like being a journalist, ladies and gentlemen. I like telling people what's going on. I will leave politics for other hosts here at the Land of Israel Network. Yishai Fleischer is running for Knesset. Good luck to him. He's a great guy. He's inspirational, as you hear listening to his show, which I encourage you to do. Arvi and Jeremy ran for Knesset. Maybe they will again. They're great people. I'm not just saying this. I'm saying it because they're really great people with deep thinkers and good ideas and everything, and would be great public servants. Not for me, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm saying this has been all one long prelude to what's gone on since I wrote an article last week in the Jerusalem Post, in which I appeared to criticize the Vice President of the United States. Okay? I basically wrote in an analysis that went on page 1 that the visit of Mike Pence to Israel was much ado about nothing, that it wasn't a big deal, that here he is preaching to the converted, and who's the vice president anyway? What does he really do? What responsibilities does he have? Is that even a real job? Fine, so I got carried away. I tried to be funny. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I meant no disrespect to the Vice President of the United States, who I realize is a great man, who I realize has had an influence on the President of the United States, who I realize cares for Israel very deeply due to his evangelical Christian religious faith, which is a totally legitimate reason to love Israel, and because he understands the history, and because he's a smart man who has realized that when it comes to the land of Israel belonging to the Jewish people, history, not just God, justice, not just religion, is on our side. And so I've gotten a lot of letters. Some of them were printed in the Jerusalem Post. I have my own rabbi try to disown me. And it hasn't stopped. This morning, I received an email from a woman I respect tremendously, who has organized lectures for me in the past in the United States, and maybe because of that article won't again. I hope not. But she wrote me, I feel unkind criticizing what you have written or retweeted. However, I think you're missing the mark about what's going on in the U.S. What Pence said in Israel was historic, whether certain Americans agree or not. Agree. I agree, Miss Wonderful Person there in New York. And if you received an impression that I don't think that what Pence said in Israel was historic or special or correct, then I'm putting that to rest. It was indeed. She wrote, second, the average Democrat or Jew has no idea about the conversion issues or women praying at the wall or at a window. It's absurd that any Israeli thinks this is why the Democratic Party is shifting away from Israel. What it tells me is that Israelis who think they are in the know are tone deaf to the changes that are going on in the U.S. that are directed to Israel in the first instance, but are sweeping Israel into its wake. Okay, so in this paragraph, she's referring to a news article that I wrote in today's Jerusalem Post, in which I wrote, as I do, every Monday, I visit the faction meetings of the faction heads in the Knesset, and I write down what they say. The faction heads who have meetings every single week are Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid and Avi Gabay of the Zionist Union/Labor Party. Others do it sometimes. Netanyahu was abroad yesterday in Moscow, so he didn't do it. He often doesn't do it. And so it happens to be that a lot of Mondays my articles are what Lapid and Gabay had to say. Okay, that does not make it my opinion. I am a news reporter. I'm reporting what they say. And they said they believe that Netanyahu is to blame for the study that was released by the Pew Research Center, which found that there is a widening gap between Republicans and Democrats about Israel when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. The question was worded strictly in a conflict way. They weren't saying, we don't like Israel. They were saying that when it comes to the conflict, we understand both sides, and we don't feel comfortable saying we are pro-Israel and not pro-Palestinian. Those things do not have to be mutually exclusive. And the poll was really written in a way that would make them. And they didn't feel comfortable with that. And that, in a sense, is a problem. But it's not as big a problem as them saying they don't like Israel. We like only the Palestinians. That is not what they were saying. But Lapid and Gabay kind of made it look that way for their own narrow political interests. That's what they do. They are not journalists. Lapid was once. He's not now. He is a politician. And so they, not me, Gil Hoffman is the reporter, said that the Democrats are shifting away from Israel, and it is Netanyahu's fault. They said, now this is Tzipi Livni said this after meeting with conservative Jewish leaders who put this in her head. They said it's because of the Western Wall dispute, in which Netanyahu abandoned an agreement reached with the ultra-Orthodox, which would have done two main things. It would have created an entrance from the current Western Wall area to a current area where there is egalitarian prayer on the side of the Western Wall. It already exists. There is egalitarian prayer there. The entrance right now is all the way around. There would be an entrance created. People mistakenly think they're going to create an egalitarian prayer area at the Western Wall. They're going to take the current existing places that are reserved for men and for women and make it be three: men, women, and everybody. No, nobody thinks that's going to happen. That wasn't the agreement. The agreement was just to create another entrance to a current egalitarian prayer site. The other thing it would have done is to have Reform and conservative rabbis or officials who would be part of the committee that would oversee that egalitarian prayer site, which they already do now. But it would be formally under the auspices of the Western Wall. That's all it would do. And Netanyahu reneged on it because the ultra-Orthodox got pressure from their own constituencies that made them say they can't even accept that, even though it's not that big a deal. Okay? Netanyahu looked really bad to the Reform and conservative movements, who themselves milked this and made Netanyahu look bad. And definitely brought people in like Tzipi Livni to say, this is going to distance American Jews from Israel. And so then they pounce on a Pew poll and say, this is the reason it's happened. Also, the conversion issue, which is too complicated to get into, I'd require another show for it. And there's no evidence that a poll taken about support for Israel or the Palestinians, both is not an option, indicates that Democrats or left-wing Americans, left-wing American Jews in particular, are mad at Israel because of the Western Wall. Dan Shapiro wrote about this in The Atlantic. You can read that online. Dan Shapiro is not a friend of Netanyahu. Dan Shapiro, former Obama ambassador to Israel, had very difficult times with Netanyahu. He was partly responsible for the terrible relationship there was between Netanyahu and Obama. Really exacerbated that relationship. He does not have an interest in making Netanyahu look good. And in fact, he even wrote, throw in things that made him look bad. But he said this is not the reason why. The nice woman in New York who wrote the letter and Dan Shapiro actually agree on that. There have been studies that are actually about whether the Western Wall and conversion decisions have resulted in less giving to Israel, less charitable contributions, and less support for Israel in general, unrelated to the conflict. And those studies have found that it had no impact, with all due respect. And there'll continue to be people who try to take various decisions about Israel that they feel upset about and say, now this is going to turn people away. It's always been that way. There's always been something like that. And there's always been people who have an interest in saying it. And every once in a while, there will be a major donor who'll get so upset that he'll put his money where his mouth is. The best example lately has been a guy named Joey Lowe, who founded an organization called I Heart Israel, which was a pro-Israel advocacy organization that even hosted the winner of the Israeli reality show, The Ambassador, worked as an ambassador for Israel via this organization, I Heart Israel. And what is he mad at? He's mad at Israel for expelling, a little bit too strong a word, but facilitating the departure of African migrant workers to Israel. And so because of that, he is taking money away from the country. Okay? He has a right to do that. That's his money, and he can spend it however he wants. But in general, is there a trend of American Jewish donors not giving money to Israel because Netanyahu, for his own political reasons, decided that he would not implement the Western Wall decision, that instead he would take steps to facilitate that egalitarian prayer area becoming more of a prayer site, but not open that entrance? No, there is not evidence of that going on right now. So why is support for Israel among Democrats going down when it comes specifically to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? It happens to be that there's an era of moral relativism in the United States, especially when it comes to Democrats and to liberals, especially when it comes to liberal American Jews, and they don't feel comfortable with absolutes anymore. Now, that applies to Israel. That applies to a lot of people, to a lot of different issues. And yet, we have to be careful. We have to be careful because Israel is very appreciative, correctly so, of the important steps that the Trump administration, that yes includes Mike Pence, has done for Israel. Whether it's visiting the Western Wall, becoming the first sitting president of the United States to visit the Western Wall, and I don't know if Mike Pence was the first sitting vice president to do it, but if so, more power to him. Certainly, the beautiful picture of Ivanka crying at the Western Wall in a picture seen by Israelis as very sincere, and by American Jews as not so much. Certainly, this is a very different situation than we had before. We have to appreciate the decision by the Trump administration to move the embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and to do it quickly, to not let it take several years like they initially said it would. We have to appreciate completely the change of tone that there's been on Iran. We have to appreciate that the efforts to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which will go on despite the stubbornness of the Palestinian leaders right now, will be very different than it was under Obama, and much more in Israel's favor, though not as much in Israel's favor as the Palestinians and the international community think. If we go back to Mike Pence, I've covered visits to Israel of Joe Biden, his predecessor, and he saw himself as also very pro-Israel, but he was also very critical. When he came here, there was an incident of a building project in the Ramat Shlomo neighborhood of Jerusalem that was advanced from stage 3 to stage 4 in a 20-stage building process. There was someone from a left-wing organization that wanted to make Netanyahu look bad at that zoning board hearing and then leaked it to the foreign press and made it look as if Netanyahu decided to greet Biden with the construction of a new settlement, as it was put in the American media. It was a housing project, apartments in a Jewish neighborhood, an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, surrounded by ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods where no Arab ever lived and no Arab ever will. It was not that big a deal. And Biden and Hillary Clinton and Obama himself making a big deal out of that made it harder to advance the peace process. That construction project did not in any way. And so that visit is a very great contrast to the visit of Mike Pence. And so we have to appreciate that there was no but and there was no blow up during the visit of Mike Pence. We can't take that for granted anymore. And so I did not write that. Other people were writing that at the time. It was not creative to do. I instead focused in perhaps an attempt to be somewhat humorous or to at least present a different point of view that wasn't being said at the time. And maybe it didn't go too well. And so in that regard, those of you who love and appreciate the Trump administration, I apologize if you received that impression that I was disrespectful in any way to him. And those who hate the Trump administration, there's plenty to criticize there as well. But I'm an analyst, ladies and gentlemen. I explain the different points of view. I'm not a politician. I'm not going to endorse a party in Israel. I'm not going to endorse a party in the United States. I'm going to leave that for the other show hosts here at the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com who feel a lot more comfortable doing that. And so that being said, this is the last show for a week. Next week I'm going to be in California. I'm going to be on a speaking tour that is 1 week long. I'll be speaking in Passaic, New Jersey this coming Sunday. I'll be speaking on Monday at the University of Oregon and at the Portland Jewish community at night. Then I'll be speaking in Los Angeles, Orange County, and Palm Springs, California. And then I'll be back in New Jersey for Shabbat and then doing events there over the weekend. If you ever need a speaker there in your community, an analyst, not a politician, but an analyst who has really good access and got to sit in Netanyahu's chair, you can find me at gillet@jpost.com. It's been a pleasure being with you over here on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com. Looking forward to being with you again in 2 weeks from here in Jerusalem.